Hi guys, are you ready for the apocalypse? I'm certainly in survival mode after working on my zombie novel titled Beef with the Apocalypse. This week's excerpt is from halfway through chapter 1. Azaria wakes up to hear growling in the corridor outside her apartment and she goes to investigate. There's some swearing which I've edited out of this version. Okay, here's chapter 1. As she approached the turn in the corridor, her nose caught a whiff of something unpleasant, almost like hot roadkill. Ugh. The stench grew more pronounced the closer she got, and she was worried about what she'd find. An instinct was screaming at her to hurry, to help whomever was screaming so loudly, but a stronger instinct was telling her she should run the other direction. The noises of snarls and screams bounced and echoed around the bare hallway, which was gray, painted concrete, and had no sound absorbers like a carpet overtop. She'd always wondered why the building owners had bothered painting the concrete gray. That was like painting wood brown. It seemed silly, when that's the color it already was. She reached the turn and leaned her head around the corner, and what she saw was unbelievable. She didn't know the woman's name, since she had moved in next door to Azari only a couple months ago. Azari had passed her in the hallway a time or two, enough to nod and say hi. She was older and perhaps single, since she was never with anyone else. Right now the woman was on her back on the ground, yelling and struggling against something. That something was her pet chihuahua, a harmless-looking ball of fluff that liked to bark at anything that moved. At most the creature must weigh 5 pounds, if that. A cat could sneeze and knock the thing over. But not now. The dog's owner had cuts across her body that were bleeding profusely. She was holding her dog with both hands around his torso, arms straining as she tried to keep it away from her face. It was snarling and snapping and seemed to possess a strength that belied its tiny, floofy size. Azari leapt forward and used the pointed end of her umbrella to poke into the dog's mouth and give it something to chew on. "Come on!" she yelled at the woman. The dog immediately latched onto the umbrella, and to Azari's shocked surprise began chomping down on it. Tiny flakes of wood began drifting down as it razored its way through it like a slow-mo cartoon shark. "Holy F!" she shouted. With the distraction, the woman seemed to gain the upper hand. With a grunt, she threw the dog with all her might down the corridor away from them. That's when Azari saw what she had missed before. Another person was lying prone halfway down the hallway. Only that person wasn't moving. And for a good reason, too. He was missing his face. There was a pit bull snarling over him and crunching down through the man's skull to finish the job it had started. But the guy was already dead. That was pretty damn obvious. The chihuahua seemed ready to go tearing back toward them to attack, but then it raised its head, sniffing the air. It was closer to the body that the pit bull was gnawing on, and it followed its nose away from Azari and the woman and started gnawing on the man's leg through his jeans. "Come on," Azari whispered, grabbing the woman's arm and helping haul her to her feet. They cautiously backed away. No way in hell Azari was turning her back on those two dogs, and then shuffled quickly down the short hallway, trying not to make much sound to draw attention to themselves. I'm going to go back home," the woman muttered dazedly. Not too loud. They were standing in front of her door, which was one down and across the hallway from Azari's. "Are you sure?" Azari whispered. She glanced her over. Blood was dripping down onto the cement in a trail back the way they came. "Do you have first aid?" Yes," the woman said. "I need to. Hinton just went crazy. I don't know what happened. He just—" She blinked quickly, her eyes moist. "Call 911, Azari suggested gently. "I'll do the same. Those dogs need to be contained before they hurt anyone else." "Yes," the woman muttered again. Her eyes were glassy, but she had refused Azari's help. What else could Azari do? Maybe when she called emergency services, she'd suggest they check up on her neighbor, too. Couldn't hurt. She figured the woman was probably in shock. The woman fumbled in her pocket and got out her keys. Her hands were shaking so badly that she almost dropped them before she managed to get them into the lock and let herself inside. Azaria waved, but the woman didn't seem to see, just shut the door behind her. "Well," Azari said, nonplussed. The snarling was still going on, and she hightailed it back to her own apartment and double-locked the door. Then she leaned against it, putting both of her hands against the surface as if she could hold back what she had just seen. That poor woman. But even more so, that poor guy. She didn't get a long enough look to know who it was, or if it was even someone she would know. She'd been living here for about 5 years, and she considered herself a reasonably friendly person. There were a lot of long-term renters like her who'd been here even longer, since the place was built 20 years ago, and many of them were dog owners. She realized her hands were shaking too, and she took a deep breath. Perhaps it wasn't full-blown shock like her neighbor, who'd actually been attacked, but the body in the corridor had been pretty horrific. And the smell. Azari's nose wrinkled. It smelled like rotten meat and the bathroom at a roadside diner all mixed into one, pungent and stomach-turning. She eyed her umbrella in disgust. The end was gnawed to ruin, and there were also smears of red on it, presumably from the dog's mouth, which had been covered in its owner's blood. Glad I'm not a pet owner, she said to herself. She wiped it off as best as she could with a paper towel, but the umbrella probably was ruined. She hung it up on her closet's doorknob anyway. She'd deal with it later. First, the emergency call. She got her phone from her nightstand and dialed 911. The line engaged almost immediately, but instead of a live person's voice, all she got was, "Please stay on the line. We are experiencing heavier than normal call volume. We will answer as soon as possible." Wow. She'd never gotten that kind of response before. Although tempted to hang up, she followed what the impersonal machine voice had told her. She stayed on the line. But she wandered over to her living room holding her phone. Her main living room was a combined kitchen-living room with the kitchen area near the front door and the living room near the back, and turned on her TV. Mostly she had streaming, but she had a few news stations. She turned the volume way down. She didn't want to attract any attention from the animals in the hallway, and turned on the local channel. "Reports of attacks are coming in from all over Edmonton. The RCMP has advised that people stay home, put household pets outside their residences, and lock their doors." Azari watched in horror as the anchor's face switched out to home footage sent to them of unhinged animals. Dogs, cats, even a pet snake, being filmed attacking people. "We have animal expert Dr. Kwan to give us more information about what to expect." As the image shifted to a man's lined face and the conversation veered off into potential responses about what was happening, Azari's phone repeated in her ear, "Please stay on the line. We are experiencing heavier than normal call volume. We will answer as soon as possible." Her nerveless fingers relaxed, and she dropped her cell onto the couch, sinking down next to it and putting her hands over her mouth. "Holy F," she repeated, and the sentiment seemed appropriate. If you like this, stay tuned for my next book project, which will be starting on Monday. Next week, my book will be in the YA genre and will be set in beautiful and earthquake-prone San Francisco. See you then.